Eagles Entertainment.
With the 15th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, presented by Life Brand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and today we are going to preview the linebacker position here for the 2022 NFL Draft. And we're going to do that with Draft Buzz, where Dane, Brugler, Ben Fennell, and I, we're going to go through the entire class of linebackers, all the different superlatives, all the different areas of the draft. We're going to break it down, a bunch of prospects, dozens of names coming your way here in the next hour. Then we're going to get into our On the Clock segment, where, again, Ben, Dane, and I, we're going to pick 3 players for 3 teams at 3 positions at 3 random parts of the draft. One of my favorite exercises that we do on a weekly basis here on the show. And then we're going to wrap things up with our draft mailbag. A couple of good questions there from you guys at the end of the show. And the best way to get to us here for that segment, head on over to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify, wherever you can leave one of those ratings and one of those comments. Really appreciate everybody that has thrown us your support here in recent weeks. We've been getting constant reviews, constant questions, and mock drafts and big boards and rankings and prospect questions. Really appreciate everybody that has gone on and left that rating, left that comment. It really helps us make the show more available to others that are looking for NFL Draft podcasts. That said, let's get going here. I'm excited to talk through linebackers today. It's time for Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, let's start things off here with Draft Buzz. I welcome in Dane, Brugler, Ben Fennell. And guys, before we get into our linebacker preview, some quick news from over the last few days, and it's actually linebacker related. Damone Clark, linebacker from LSU, it was announced, I believe, on Friday. He was going to have to undergo surgery. Apparently, at the combine, it was found out that he had a herniated disc in his back, and now he has to get spinal fusion surgery, which may cost him his rookie season. Obviously, that's still up in the air at this point, but regardless, getting surgery on his back, and that will cost him a few months here. So, Dane, real quickly, my understanding was Clark was probably in that early day 2 range. To me, like a guy that was going to go higher than a lot of people thought. How do you feel like this affects his draft stock? Where did you see him before the surgery?
Yeah, I think day 2 is that's very fair. Probably somewhere between the 4th and 6th or 7th linebacker drafted.
Yeah.
But now it's tough with an injury like this that's going to sideline you, and you don't know. Everybody is different, right? And how they respond to such a serious injury. When you're talking about a spinal cord, it's tough. There is a realistic scenario where he goes undrafted. Now you can see a team using a late round pick on him to the stash, and hopefully he comes back stronger than ever. But we're talking about, and it's also different, a little bit different than say like a Justin Ross who played receiver. Justin, you're going to get tackled obviously as a receiver, but as a linebacker, where you're taking so much contact every single game, and you do worry about, and especially a guy like Damone Clark who is. He's a hammer looking for a nail. I mean, that's how he plays. And so you do worry about, okay, if he still plays at that same level, is he going to get injured again? Or is there a worry of that? Or even if it mentally, can he play at that same level again, with knowing that he had this injury? So a lot of question marks that I think that teams are trying to grapple with right now to figure out where to put him on the draft board and where they'd feel comfortable drafting him, if they would feel comfortable drafting him.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that when you look at the linebacker depth overall, I do feel like by the time you get to the late part of the draft, it does kind of dry up a little bit. So I wonder if that kind of helps him in terms of hearing his name called before the end of draft weekend. But it's just tough. You hate seeing news like that. Obviously, one of the more talented players in this class, and a guy that we would have talked about extensively here in this episode. But that being said, let's get into this linebacker preview. And again, we're just going to kind of go superlative by superlative, go category by category here. Dane, you and I are going to hit on some of the day 1 and day 2 options. Ben, you're going to hit us with some of those sleepers there when we get to day 3, the guys that we need to know when we get to Saturday of draft weekend. Real quickly, before we start, over the last decade, the average number of linebackers drafted every year, just under 25. And that number has been climbing in recent years. It was 32 in 2018. There was 27 in 2020. There was 25 last year. So you get a sense of just about how many of these guys are going off the board every single season. And again, like I mentioned, over the last 3-4 years, it's been higher than that 10-year average. So we could see anywhere, 25, 26, 27 of these players that we're going to talk about here today, hear their name called when we get to draft weekend. That said, let's go with this first category, and it's going to be the best combo skill set. Who presents the best blend of being able to defend the run and also cover in the pass game? And that's obviously what you're looking for in a pure 3-down player. Dane, I'll come to you first. Who's a guy that you feel day one, day two presents that best combo skill set?
Got to go with Devin Lloyd here out of Utah. All you have to do is look at his final stat line from this year. Had over 100 tackles. He had 22 tackles for loss, second best in the nation. And pass coverage, double-digit passes defended, and 4 interceptions. So he made plays in every direction, against the run, against the pass. He is a former high school safety, so he has that experience. He's very comfortable dropping in space and playing in coverage. But he's also explosive, where he can play downhill, and he has the range. He has the ability to work inside. So with Devin Lloyd, you're getting a little bit of everything. And I mean, heck, let's not limit it to 3 downs. Let's throw in 4 downs. He had over 500 special team snaps as well. So Devin Lloyd can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and I would say that most people know about Devin Lloyd and the skill set he presents. And one guy that we've also talked a lot about on this show is Georgia linebacker Quay Walker at 6'3 3/4, 241 pounds, just under 33-inch long arms. This is a guy with the body type you're looking for in today's league, but he doesn't give up athleticism when you get that size. This is a guy who ran 4.52 at the combine, which again, at 240 pounds, that's an impressive number. You look at the rest of the athletic testing, it's all pretty good. And again, at that size, that's what makes him such an intriguing option. He can play in space, a really good athlete, a guy that's really light on his feet. He can move laterally. He can close distance. He eats up grass really, really well. He's got excellent range, covers a ton of ground, and also just handles contact really, really well. So when you talk about a guy that can defeat blocks in the run game, play in space in the pass game, he was an edge rusher coming out of high school. They transitioned him to more of an off-ball role, so it took him a little bit of time to be able to get there. But talking about a player that could man up on tight ends in the SEC, showed that ability to match routes and underneath zone coverage, so he can offer some things there in the pass game, and also is a really good blitzer as well, like you mentioned there with Devin Lloyd, Dane. So Quay Walker, a guy we just talked about him last week with Greg Cosell, and Greg kind of waxed poetic there on Quay. He's a player to know for certain when we get into the first couple of days of the draft. But that said,
Fran, why wouldn't he go in the first round? I mean, I think you're spot on with what you said. I want you to tell me why he might not go in the first round.
So I would say that it's number one, you got 17 starts over the course of his entire career, so did not play a ton. I think a lot of the people that have watched him over the course of his career would say, oh, he's a little bit slow to trigger. Is the eye discipline where we would want that to be? Again, for a guy that's relatively new to the position and hasn't played a ton of ball, I would expect that. But then also the other aspect of that, you talked about the production that Devin Lloyd had, and whether it's sack production, he had 15.5 sacks. Quay Walker only had 5. You look at ball disruptions, interceptions, and pass breakups. Devin Lloyd had 13. Quay Walker had 3, right? So that you're talking more about his traits and what he could be as opposed to what he has already done. But that's some would say that's also the name of the draft, right? So what can a guy be moving forward? But Quay Walker, definitely an intriguing player. And I do understand the people that, are a little bit further down the list on him, but still a really, really interesting talent. Ben, take us home here. Who's a guy on day 3 that you feel presents that same combo skill set?
I'm going to go with Troy Anderson out of Montana, who I have a 3rd, 4th round grade on. So I'm kind of straddling the day 2, day 3 there. But as far as being the best blend of a run defender and pass coverage defender, I just feel like his range, his length, his energy, his burst, the ball skills. He's such a loose athlete. I mean, in the run game, his ability to fill gaps, take on blocks, play off blocks. He can scrape laterally. He can play in space when he's free and has free alleys to the ball carrier, and really good in coverage as well. His loose hips, the zone drops, good ball skills, a little clunky in some man-to-man stuff. I still think his instincts are raw. His play idea is raw. His play anticipation is raw. But as far as just having the skill set, the ability, the athleticism of being a run defender and going backwards in coverage, he has a lot of things to like. And was probably the top 5 standout performer at the combine back in Indy a few weeks ago, being 6'3.5", 243, running the 4.42, which you see the flashes of his 100-meter, 200-meter state championship pedigree back in high school, jumping 36 inches, 10.8 in the broad, checked a lot of boxes in shorts and a t-shirt, strong week at the Senior Bowl. Don't forget, this is a guy that's converting from offense a few years ago. So he's still kind of learning the position. So all those things about instincts and play ID and FBI still kind of coming into his way there, but he has a lot of tools and athleticism that you really can't coach.
A lot of reasons to think that his best football, his most productive football could be ahead of him. And that's why a lot of people are really high on Troy Anderson. Let's go to the next category here, guys. And that's the most instinctive. Who sees the game the best? Who plays the fastest and is always in the right position? For me, I'm going to go back to the Mountain West Conference. And I'm going to go to Chad Muma from Wyoming. 6'3", 239 pounds, converted high school safety, made the move to linebacker, and has just been really productive over the last couple of years, especially this year. First team all-conference player, is an All-American finalist for the Buckus Awards, the top defender in college football. And when you look at the production, it matches up with the traits that you show up on film. This guy is always in position to be able to make plays. He tested really well out in Indianapolis. He had a good week in the Senior Bowl, all that. But when you talk just about his eye discipline, I think that he's got a really fast trigger. He sees things and he goes. His play recognition, you can see him pointing things out pre-snap. That's against the run and against the pass. You saw that in Mobile, honestly. There were plenty of plays where you saw him getting other guys lined up and him being the first at the football. Look, he ran 4.62. That's a fine number. He's not the fastest, right? He's not the guy that you're going to say, oh, wow, look at his blazing speed to get from point A to point B. That's not necessarily Muma. He is all about playing through contact. So he's really efficient in when he's getting from A to B, but also he's going to play fast because he just sees it so quickly. So Chad Muma, it looks like, based off mock drafts, like kind of that early second round range. We'll see exactly when he comes off the board, but he's my pick here for this category. Dane, who do you like here for this one?
I will say Nakobe Dean out of Georgia, who talk about key read flow skills. He's got that. He sees things really well. Explosive trigger. He's going to beat blockers to the spot. He's a missile in the run game. And I think it comes from his instincts, his ability to understand what's going to happen and then hit it before the offense can do anything about it. So, and he's also really highly skilled as a blitzer. And part of that is just this downhill speed, but also part of it is the timing. You have to have just a feel for that to get through that A gap with timing. So you're doing it, you're getting free range of the quarterback. So with Nakobe Dean, he has yet to run a 40, yet to work out. He's planning on working out April 13th. But I think teams, when they're talking about Nakobe Dean, it's not necessarily the athleticism that you're focused on. It's more of what he does with his mind and the way his just play personality, with the way he attacks downhill, that gets you excited as a prospect.
Yeah, I think when you look at Dean, the intangibles aspect of it, that's going to be the driving force there with his draft slot. Ben, how about you? Most instinctive guy when we get to day 3?
Most instinctive linebacker, day 3. I don't know if this is going to be a surprise or not, but I'm going to go with Jeremiah Gemmel out of North Carolina. Had his pro day today as we're sitting here on Monday afternoon recording here. This guy's an absolute film junkie. You could just see his anticipation, his play ID, his recognition, him setting guys up pre-snap as well. Watch all the kind of tendency breakers, or not tendency breakers, but just being aware of tendencies in games. It always seems to be a step ahead of the action. Watch that Notre Dame game, especially in short yardage stuff. Seemed to always know where the ball was going to go. Really good in play action concepts as well, and misdirection. He just seems like a guy that always knows where the ball is going. Maybe doesn't make every play, but is always in position. It just seems like he's that guy that's doing a lot of work from Sunday to Friday. And it really shows up on Saturday with how fast he can play and that he seems to always be in the right spots. I think he's a really good day 3 option, 3-year starter at North Carolina, and that Mike Will role out there. North Carolina didn't have the great season as a team in 2021, and I feel like his stock really took a hit because of that. But Jeremiah Gemmel is a really good player.
Yeah, he's a player. I'm really glad, Ben, that you brought him up, because he's a guy I feel like is just underrated at this point. He was going to go to the Senior Bowl, injury prevented him from doing that. Same reason why we didn't see him work out in Indianapolis. So Gemmel deserves a lot of praise. And I'm glad that you were here to be able to give that to him. Let's get to the next category here. Best coverage player, whether that's in man coverage against backs or tight ends or in zone coverage. Who do you feel like holds up best playing in reverse? Dane, I'll come to you first.
I'm going to go with a guy who I believe has a chance to go on day 2. And that's JoJo Domann from Nebraska. He's played that nickel role in that defense. So he was constantly put on an island in space and asked to drive on the football, asked to anticipate passing lanes. And he moves pretty well for a guy that's 230 pounds. At his pro day, He ran a 6.88 3-cone, which is outstanding for that size and that position. So a guy that is smooth in his coverage turns, has a good feel for, what the offense is trying to do with their, different levels of routes and the combinations. I think Doman, that's what you're drafting him for, is to be that nickel linebacker, that guy that can hold up in coverage, that can hold up in space. There's some similarities to Jabril Cox from last year coming out of LSU. You trusted him out there. So JoJo Doman would be my pick here for coverage.
I'm going to go to Alabama, where we're going to talk about Christian Harris, who I think when you look at his profile as a player who had never played linebacker before arriving in Tuscaloosa, was forced into the lineup as a true freshman due to injuries on that defense, has to step in week one, play for Nick Saban as a true freshman middle linebacker, and he's able to do it at a high level. That's a nice, easy profile to be able to make a bet on, right? And Christian Harris, at his size, you're talking about a guy that ran 4.43 at the combine at 6 foot, 226 pounds, a little bit lighter than people thought. But this is a guy that, again, playing safety, he's got some of those coverage instincts, and that shows up whether he's playing man-to-man against the back and tight end, which he did in the SEC, or as a zone defender. He was really active in the hook curl area. He was able to clog up throwing lanes. He really felt routes developing all around him. And that's what, to me, the big thing that stood out to me about him is just his feel in coverage. And for some reason, I feel like he gets kind of knocked for this guy. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if he's given up a lot of receptions or whatnot. I would say that the numbers from like PFF haven't necessarily pointed in that direction, but Christian Harris, to me, in coverage, he checks a lot of the boxes that you're looking for. So I would say he'd be my pick here for this category. Ben, how about you for day 3?
And he played in coverage a ton, despite a lot of splash plays as a blitzer and a QB spy. He was about an 80% coverage guy as well. So he wasn't always coming forward just as a blitzer, like some of those other linebackers in this class. But on day 3, I'm going to go with another one that may be a little bit of an eye-opener to people. And that's DeMarco Jackson out of Appalachian State, who you think 6 foot, 235, that's a little squatty to be a coverage player. This guy has exceptional length at nearly 80-inch wingspan, over 32-inch arms, ran 4.55, jumped 10.5 in the broad at the combine. He's a really, really good player. And you start kind of peeling back some layers to his tape and his profile. I mean, state champ in the discus, really good high school running back, really athletic profile, over 600 snaps and special teams. But guys, over the last 3 years in college football among linebackers, he is the most forced incompletions. He has tons of interceptions, tons of plays on the ball. I posted one this morning of flipping his hips and turning and running with Isaiah Likely down the seam. Might be the best play in coverage I've seen from a linebacker all class. He's a guy that I think reminds me a lot of Kenny Young coming out of UCLA. Similar height, weight, maybe not the height profile you would think of a coverage linebacker. He's not 6'3" or in that 6'1", 235. But this guy can move. And when you start pulling back all those layers to his tape, he's a guy I want on my team. And he's a guy you want to fill out your linebacker room on day 3. So special teams, coverage ability, leadership, 2-time captain, really tough background with, the discus and the high school running back. He's a guy, DeMarco Jackson. Don't forget about him on draft day.
It's like TJ Edwards, right? Where TJ Edwards, when you look at him from just off the hoof, you would say, oh, that guy's not a coverage player. But TJ Edwards at Wisconsin, so instinctive, did an outstanding job in coverage, played the ball well, but read routes, felt things developing around him. And because of that was really, really productive. And what have we seen from him whenever he's played in the NFL? He's made plays in coverage. He's clogging up passing lanes, making plays on the football. And I think that's a great point there on DeMarco Jackson, who you also, Ben, could have talked about here in this upcoming category. And that is the best at playing through contact. Who is the whether it's playing downhill or in traffic sideline to sideline, who does the best playing through contact? And for me, Ben, I'm going to talk about a guy that you actually already brought up a little bit ago in Troy Anderson from Montana State. And as you mentioned, you said, look, he's probably right teetering on that early day 3, late day 2 range. And when I look at Anderson coming out of Montana State, you mentioned 6'3.5", 243 pounds. He goes to the combine. He runs 4.4. He has the best 10-yard split of any linebacker drafted in the last decade. He goes 128 inches in the broad jump. And those measurables, they look at how explosive a player is. And if you've got explosiveness with size and girth, which Troy Anderson has at 243 pounds, that's typically going to equate to power. And we saw that at the Senior Bowl, how quickly he was able to get through contact, especially playing sideline to sideline. You're trying to block this guy. It's not happening on the perimeter. I think Anderson, when you look at it, he's got to get some things right from a technical standpoint. As Ben mentioned, he's got to see things a little bit faster as he gets a little bit more comfortable playing the position. But I think when you look at his height, weight, speed, his ability to defeat blocks, defeat contact, really, really impressive. So Troy Anderson, he's my pick here in terms of being able to play through contact. Dane, who you like here for this category?
For me, the first name that came to mind was Leo Chenal from Wisconsin. His contact balance downhill is something that's really, really impressive. Maybe the most impressive thing that he does. Fights through bodies, squeezes gaps, really good short area quickness so he can stay centered, but also change directions. And the toughness that he offers is so gritty and competitive at the point of attack. So Leo Chenal, when he's working downhill, there's just a lot of different ways that he could be productive, whether it's because of that contact balance, whether it's the quickness that he offers, whether it's the power and the strength, the toughness. It's just he's got a full package of traits to offer as a downhill player. And that's why we're talking about Leo Chenal as a possible top 75, top 50 type of player. He's really impressive in that area.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the strengths of his game. And Ben, for people that can't see you right now, you were upset. I think that was your pick there for day 3. And again, that kind of speaks to where Chenal is right now, draft stock wise, that late day 2, early day 3 range potentially. Who do you like here for the third day of the draft?
Yeah, I got sniped by Dane. It's been a couple of weeks since the sniping's been happening.
He's not a day 3 guy.
But I'm light on my feet here. It's okay. I can adjust and, make a quick change. I got sneaks on today, so I'm going to change directions. Let's go with Darian Beavers out of Cincinnati, who's an absolute hulking linebacker at 6'4", over 250 pounds, but plays in space and plays the Mike Will and will drop into the curl and will buzz out to the flat with over 700 special team snaps. He's a guy with his size absolutely tears through these poor slot receivers trying to wall him off and, can easily get through blocks playing downhill. He has a really interesting play profile, played a lot of different spots for that Cincinnati defense since coming over from UConn, has really bulked up since high school and since UConn. He's an interesting player. Darian Beaver, 6'4", 250. He will absolutely play through some contact for you.
That's definitely one of the best things about his game for sure. That versatility is going to be really valuable for him moving through the rest of the process. Let's get to the next one here. Best blitzer. Who's just the best at getting after the quarterback? Dane, for day 1, day 2, who's the guy that comes to mind?
Channing Tindall from Georgia, a guy with 0 career starts on his resume, but ran a 4.47 at the combine at 230 pounds. That speed, that see ball, get ball type of play style that he offers is a lot of fun to watch. And it's going to get him drafted somewhere on day 2. And you're going to see it the most on special teams and then as a blitzer, because that's where he can really shine. He's explosive downhill. He closes really well. You think about all those studs on the Georgia defense, and he finished 4th on the team in sacks. And this is a guy that didn't start. So, he didn't necessarily play as many snaps as some other players. So there's the downhill closing skills with what Channing Tindall offers. That's what gets you excited and why you can draft a player with his resume that feels incomplete. But you could draft a guy with that type of talent because you see the speed and what he can offer.
Dane, that's a great term there, downhill closing ability, because we know he's fast in a linear fashion. But when you're blitzing at a high-end speed and coming downhill, that quarterback takes 2 steps left, suddenly you're then behind the play. Their ability to change directions at that high speed and play so fluid is so impressive, whether it's Tindall or Nakobe Dean or even a Christian Harris. Some of these very explosive linebackers this class that can be fast and accelerate while moving and changing directions on the fly. You typically see that often with the QB spine and the blitzing, and Channing Tindall does that as well as anyone in this class.
Real quick, for me in that same category, Dane, you mentioned Devin Lloyd earlier, and this is the guy that's projected by most to be a first-round pick in this draft. And when you look at his blitzing ability, his ability to get after the quarterback, he's finished in the top 3 in sacks for the Utes each of the past 3 years. He had 7 sacks this year. He had 2 sacks a year ago in 5 games. And he had 6.5 sacks in that loaded Utah defense back in 2019. And it's not just blitzing from the second level. They'll mug him up in A gaps. They'll line him up off the edge, just ask him to beat tackles. So I think when you look at Devin Lloyd, some of the things that he can do from a pass rush standpoint that will definitely offer value moving into the NFL. Ben, take us home. Who's a blitzer you like here on the third day?
All right, two guys really fast. Last 3 years in college football. This is the most pressures and the fifth most pressures among linebackers. The most, Micah McFadden, Indiana. He's a guy that typically flies downhill on third down, will blast the running backs. And fifth most, Terrell Bernard out of Baylor. Excuse me. He's a guy that would often line up as a sub rusher and like the blitz as well too. He doesn't have the length profile you would really want, or maybe the insane speed or acceleration, but he's a really tough player, really athletic. And if he gets his hands on you, you're typically getting to the ground. So Terrell Bernard, Baylor, Micah McFadden, Indiana.
He's a sneaky player, Terrell Bernard. And honestly, it's kind of like Gemmel, where I think he's a little bit underrated. He's had a couple of injuries over the course of his career, and so medical is going to be a big deal for him. But a high character player. You mentioned the versatility. That's going to be big for him moving into the NFL. All right, guys, let's round this out with some player comps here. We've got a couple more categories, some player comparisons that we really like. Ben, I'll come to you first here. Who's a player comparison in this linebacker class that really catches your eye?
Well, let me hit you with two that I just talked about. We just said Terrell Bernard, Micah McFadden. Let me, pick some comps for those two. Micah McFadden, Alex Anzalone. If you remember, he came out of Florida, I think a little injured as a prospect, ended up having a nice career with the Saints, now with the Lions. Terrell Bernard maybe doesn't have the length profile we want. That's okay. We've seen a lot of linebackers survive at 6 foot, 225, 230 with their athleticism and toughness. I see a lot of Wesley Woodyard, who is an outside linebacker out of Kentucky that played in the NFL for 10, 12 years. So Terrell Bernard, Wesley Woodyard, Micah McFadden, Alex Anzalone.
I like it. I'm going to go into the big. You talked about Terrell Bernard. I'll stay in the Big 12. I'm going to go Kyron Johnson from Kansas, who was not invited to the combine, but was down at the Senior Bowl. Was a late ad down there for Mobile. 6 foot, 230 pounds, so an undersized player, but played most of his snaps off the edge. So a really small pass rusher that I think a lot of people project to be more of that stacked role that can come down and blitz off the edge as a potential Sam or rush player. And I think when you look at Kyron Johnson, he profiles very similarly to a guy that the Eagles just drafted last year in the 7th round, and that's Patrick Johnson. And I think when you look at Kyron, he's going to offer rush value, right? It's 3rd and long. You've got a guy that has the chops to be able to get after the quarterback and give you value there, but he's got outstanding range. He's a good athlete. He chases to the perimeter. I love his effort. There's going to be some outstanding high motor plays when he gets on the field defensively. He's also been a core special teamer over the course of his career, 415 core special team snaps as a Jayhawk. So I think when you look at Kyron Johnson, this is a guy that projects really well in that kind of role, in that mold, moving forward to the league. Dane, who's a player comp that you like here from this linebacker group?
What about Leo Chenal and Jordan Brooks, who, snuck into the first round a couple years ago? The story on Jordan Brooks was, really good downhill, rangy, not the biggest player. And Chenal's got a little more size up to him. But I think that they both win as players, where their strengths are in terms of downhill, they got speed, they've got change of direction, power. I think their strengths kind of align with what they can do. So Leo Chenal, Jordan Brooks. I didn't really expect that going in, but I don't hate it when I was done with my report.
Especially with the athletic measurables. So that's
my comp section for Leo Chenal is all over the place. I watched him like 5 different times and got like 5 different tastes of what I thought he can be. I wrote down Dante Hightower, AJ Hawk one day, Zach Bond one day, Andy Katzenmoyer one day. I wrote down Zach Diassi one day. Okay. So I got all sorts of comps and heights, weights, speeds, converted long snappers. I don't know what to do with this kid, but he's a freak athlete. He's tough and he's big.
The Hightower one hit me over the head, like as soon as we turned it on, just in terms of how he could be used and the body type. But obviously the testing, much different than that. So really interesting player from that standpoint. Guys, let's wrap it up with some players that are just flying under the radar. And we'll start with the guys who we're just surprised is just not getting more love. Ben, I'll come back to you here. Who's the guy that you're surprised just is not getting more love at this point in the process?
Everybody I've mentioned up to this point. So yeah, the DeMarco Jacksons of the world, the Darian Beavers, Terrell Bernard, a lot of these day 3 guys that I'm kind of talking and highlighting in this podcast so far, they aren't really dominating the conversation right now. It's a top of the draft world as far as, draft narratives and media coverage. Everyone wants to know the first round mocks in your top 50s and maybe a top 100 if you're looking for it. Day 3 doesn't get a lot of attention, but there's 4 rounds on day 3. These are the positions that fill out your rosters. These are the positions that get thrusted into lineups on the drop of a hat, in week 10 when there's an injury and you want them to perform. Don't forget, this draft is more than just the first round and the first 2 days. So there's a lot of guys that are going to go on day 3. It's okay to start talking about them early. So Darian Bernard, Micah McFadden, Jeremiah Gemmel, those guys are going to play on NFL teams.
All right. Well, for me, I'm going to go with Malcolm Rodriguez from Oklahoma, a player we have not spoken about yet, but or from Oklahoma State, rather. I think the big thing when you're looking at Rodriguez, it's going to come down to how important size is for you at the linebacker position, because he's 5'11" with just over 30-inch arms. All right. And you say it's not, what do we always say on the pod? It's not a problem until it's a problem. And I think when you look at Malcolm Rodriguez, he's got 48 starts under his belt, over 3,000 snaps played on defense, extremely productive across the board. He's a freak athlete. He ran 4.5. He's got a 1.5 10-yard split. He went 39.5 in the vert. That athleticism shows up on film. He's got outstanding range. He's got burst to close on the football, a converted safety who's got that ability to play in coverage. He's got a feel for playing in reverse. He can man up on backs. He's a little bit small to man up on tight ends, but he's got that matchability, and he defeats contact really well in the Big 12, right? He's got a surprising ability to defeat those blocks. If you think that carries over to the NFL, Malcolm Rodriguez is going to be a day 2 pick. If you don't think that carries over, that's where you have questions about his ability to translate. So I think when you look at Malcolm Rodriguez, the skill set, really, really, really intriguing. I think the film is really fun. And he was only at the NFLPA game. I was surprised he didn't end up at a bigger game. He was at the combine, got dinged up halfway through the workout. But Malcolm Rodriguez, if you take away the size, I think there's a lot to like with his film. Dane, who's a guy that would fit this category for you?
If you did not say Malcolm Rodriguez, I would have. I think that's a great pick. He should be a mid-round pick. He's got that type of ability. I'm going to go with, he's a little bit further down my rankings, but still a player that I was pleasantly surprised with when I studied him. Nephi Sewell from Utah, who the older brother of Penei Sewell in that Sewell family. A former safety, moved to linebacker. So, a little bit of a tweener with his size, 5'11 and a half, 226, and shorter arms. That's what you worry about with him. But I think he's just a really good football player. You need to try and find a spot for him because the football IQ is there. He's a guy that understands what the offense is doing. So he puts himself in opportunistic situations. The anticipation's awesome. The quickness is terrific. He's got NFL intangibles. So Nephi Sewell is a player that I think should be drafted. You just have to try to find that perfect spot for him in your defense.
For me, going into the next category here, and it's along the same lines, but like that late round UDFA kind of sleeper to watch from that standpoint in the draft. I'll go with a guy that was not at the combine in Sterling Weatherford from Miami, Ohio, 6'3.5", 230 pounds, converted safety. He was a safety with the Red Hawks throughout the course of his career, now making that transition to linebacker. That's what he played down in Mobile. He did drop a little bit of weight from Mobile to the pro day. So we'll see if he's still kind of trying to toe that line of whether or not he's going to play safety or not. But similar to Nate Gary, when he was coming out of Nebraska, has that ability to come down and make plays at the second level. There are going to be questions about the arm length. Again, he's on that shorter realm, but this is a guy that's got the ability to bait throws and coverage, shows the ability to match routes. And look, at the end of the day, if you can play in the pass game at linebacker, that's going to hold up well, as long as you've got that ability to be able to play through contact. So I think Sterling Weatherford, an interesting player, late rounds to keep an eye on. Dane, how about you? Who's a guy that stands out for this category for you?
Darian Butler from Arizona State, who is just consistently productive over his career at Arizona State. He's a guy that's, he has to overcome some of the shortcomings in terms of his size. He's not a big guy. He's 5'10", 220 pounds. I wonder about his speed, but he's quick to process. I think he's quick to react to what he sees. And so there's something to work with there. There's a reason he's in the later rounds or as a PFA, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a roster spot and is able to survive in the NFL.
How about you, Ben? Who do you like here? Last one. Take us home.
I'll kind of go off the narrative of yours of the guy changing positions and Sterling Weatherford.
Yep.
This is a guy that's getting a little bit buzz with some NFL scouts as far as changing positions as well. And that's Colby Harvell-Pell out of Oklahoma State.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Who is kind of a nickel safety, but in a very thick, squatty profile. I think he measured in at 6 foot, just under 210 at the combine, put up 21 reps in the bench press to show off that core strength. It's a guy that I've always had written down, Adrian Amos and Michael Lewis as comps. Guys you want flying downhill, sticking their nose in the run game. This is a really tough player, a 4-year starter, almost 3,000 snaps played, has really good coverage skills. just maybe not the movement patterns you want as a back end player, look for him to maybe convert and be a sub linebacker, maybe a base will guy, or maybe just like a dime type of piece for a certain unit. But Colby Harvell-Pell, his position may not be solidified just yet.
No, that's a good call. He worked out with the safeties in Indy, but a lot of people view him as a potential linebacker moving forward to the NFL. Real quickly, guys, so the only big name player I feel like we didn't hit on was at the Senior Bowl as a redshirt junior, went to the Combine, tested pretty well out there in Indianapolis. That's Brian Asamoah from Oklahoma. Dane, I'd love to come to you and just get your thoughts on Asamoah and how you view him transitioning to the NFL. Has played linebacker over the course of his career. I think if you squint, you can see flashes of like a Patrick Queen style player in terms of the strengths and weaknesses, right? Queen obviously went late first round. I don't think that's going to be in the cards here for Asamoah. But how do you feel about his transition to the NFL?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Led the Sooners in tackles each of the last 2 years. He's a guy that has foot speed, ran a 4.56 at the Combine. He's undersized, 6 foot, 226 pounds, but a guy that can still work downhill. He can play outside the numbers. He has range. He can drop and cover. You do worry about him at the point of attack, just getting engulfed and being taken out of the play. But for a guy that's 6 foot, 226, has decent arm length. He's just under 33 inches in terms of his arms. And so I think he can get better at taking on contact. So you have to reconcile just being a little undersized, a little underpowered. But again, sideline to sideline speed, dependable tackler. He's got upside in coverage and as a take on player. He's that classic run and chase linebacker with NFL starting potential.
Yeah, he's a really intriguing player because of that skill set. And he's going to check a lot of boxes for some people. All right, guys, we talked about a ton of players already. We're going to pick 3 more here in our next segment. One of my favorites. It's time now to go on the clock.
Eagles fans, Merrill Reese here to tell you about the Eagles Autism Challenge presented by Lincoln Financial Group. This annual ride, run, walk event supports autism research and programming as we work hard every day to advance the conversation from awareness to action. This year's event will take place on Saturday, May 21st at Lincoln Financial Field. With your support, we can help transform the lives of individuals affected by autism. Register today at eaglesautismchallenge.org.
On the clock.
All right, guys, every week we go on the clock where every single week, Ben, Dane, and I, we get assigned random teams, random positions, and random parts of the draft. And it's up to us to kind of find a player, find that fit at a perfect part of the draft for the team that we give assigned. So I'll start here because I got assigned a team for the first round of the draft. We'll start at the top of the draft. For me, I got assigned the Tennessee Titans here, wide receiver in round 1. So that's definitely something that is in the cards. The team acquired Robert Woods here this offseason. They parted ways with Julio Jones. You still have A.J. Brown, but definitely could see them addressing wide receiver early in this draft. So when you look back at John Robinson and what he has done as the general manager over the last few years, there's definitely some things that you could point to, some breadcrumbs here to be able to follow. I would say one thing, age matters. They've only drafted one guy that's been older than 22 years old as a day 1 or day 2 pick, and that was Kevin Dodd in one of his first drafts, John Robinson. Obviously, that pick did not go well. So a lot of younger seniors that have been taken by this organization over the last couple of years on first and second day of the draft. Next thing, size matters. They definitely tend to trend bigger. If they go small, it's because they're extreme athleticism or extreme speed guys like Adoree Jackson and Darrington Evans and Jayon Brown, right? So early in the draft, definitely trend a little bit bigger. They're not afraid of one-year starters and guys that boomed in just that final season. Small schools are okay. Nearly a third of John Robinson's picks on days 1 and 2 have come from the group of 5. You look at Corey Davis and Taywan Taylor and Jonnu Smith. I mentioned Darrington Evans earlier. So they're definitely not afraid to go outside the Power 5 to find their high picks. And they're also not afraid of medical and character red flags. We've seen them take those chances really on a yearly basis here, high up in the draft. Some have worked and some have not. Now, with all of that in mind, I kind of painted out, all right, who are the receivers that we're talking about here in the first round of this draft? And Treylon Burks from Arkansas, he's a big body. He's 22 years old. He fits the bill. Drake London, 22 years old, big body, had the 1 year blow up. He fits the bill. Chris Olave, 22 years old, 4.3 speed. So he's got the lack of size, but that's okay because of how he ran. Also, keep in mind Mike Vrabel and his connection to Ohio State, right? So he's going to have a little bit more information there. You would say the same thing about Garrett Wilson, maybe a little bit more comfort if one of those two guys falls to him later in the first round. Jamison Williams, they're not afraid of that medical red flag there. Jahan Dotson, 22 years old with that 4.4 speed. Even Christian Watson at 20, he's a little bit older, but he's got the height, weight, speed, right? So a lot of options there, guys. I'm going to go Chris Olave. I think that of these guys, that he might have that best chance to be able to get to the late teens, early 20s, make himself available there for Tennessee. But Dane, I'll come to you. I'm interested to kind of get your thoughts of the guys available. Do you feel like that's a fit?
Yeah, and I think the Ohio State connection definitely makes sense. And I think it's also key to what you said. Who's going to be there? Because the Titans, they're picking at 26, and so that makes it tough. Because I think Chris Olave would be perfect at 22 to the Packers, or some of the Saints at 18. Like there's a few landmines in front of them where I could see Olave being a perfect fit. But it is very realistic that he would still be there at 26 because there's some limitations to his game. I think you look at him as a number 2 and not a true number 1 receiver in the NFL. And with AJ Brown obviously in the fold. You think that he could come in and give you what maybe a little bit something different than AJ Brown. And I think he hits a lot of those thresholds. So where they're picking and what they look for, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if one of those bigger guys, Traylon Burks, Drake London, were to fall to that point, it'd be a slam dunk. Ben, any thoughts there in terms of the players that I had in the pool, or any of those guys really kind of strike to you as being a good scheme fit there for Tennessee?
Yeah, I like Olave. I think that's a really good pick. I think that's going to be right in his landing kind of ballpark. I like his complementative skill set with, Robert Woods and for now, AJ Brown. I know some rumors about him potentially moving teams and getting shuffled around. But I think adding speed and adding someone that can win over the top seems to be the right type of piece to add that offense. End of the day, Fran, you're a hopper of guys here, whether it's Wilson or Jamison Williams, Jahan Dotson, Olave, Burks, Drake London. Add good players to your receiver room and figure it out later. So you want to add talent, playmaking ability. Those guys are all checking those boxes. That's why they're in this conversation. So now it's just getting into, maybe who fits the locker room, who fits the scheme a little bit more. Chris Olave certainly looks like a shoe-in fit there.
All right, well, let's get to your pick here, Ben, because you've got the Tampa Bay Bucks. Was who I drew for you last Friday. You've got the cornerback position, round 3. So third round, corner for the Bucks, definitely something that meshes well in terms of what their needs could be moving here into this draft.
Yeah, Bucks round 3. Okay, we got Bruce Arians, Todd Bowles, Jason Licht regime all back. Our mainstay corners, we have Carlton Davis, Jamal Dean, Murphy Bunting has kind of been sliding inside. He's more of a backup though on the outside. We brought in Logan Ryan, again, more of a safety nickel type. We've lost Richard Sherman, Pierre Desir from last year. Probably won't be bringing back those types, but we're certainly okay in this part of the draft with underclassmen as we spent, capital in the same area of the draft on Davis, Bunting, and Jamal Dean, all redshirt juniors, I'm fairly certain. They all have really good size. They're all a little over 200 pounds for the most part, all with really good speed and all really tough.
Yep.
And I think what people don't realize, Todd Bowles plays a lot of zone coverage. Only about 25% man coverage last year, and it's getting less and less each year. So you have a lot of guys with their eyes in the backfield, quarter scheme. You got to come up and tackle and be tough. So round 3, who am I thinking of with size, speed, and toughness? I'm thinking Martin Emerson, or we call him MJ Emerson now, whatever. DK Kendrick, Darian Kendrick from Georgia via Clemson, Damari Mathis, Cam Taylor-Britt, Kobe Bryant. I think it's those 5 I'm kind of thinking about right here. I think we want someone a little bit more athletic and speedy profile than a Kobe Bryant, so we're going to rule him out. I'm really looking at Damari Mathis and Cam Taylor-Britt.
Yep.
I think they both tested much better than I expected, Fran, pushing into the sub 4.4s and tough guys that have to come up and contribute and run support and protect in the flat quite often, particularly Damari Mathis in that Narduzzi quarter scheme. He's really left on islands out there. It's not easy for that scheme, but I'm actually going to go with Cam Taylor-Britt here out of Nebraska, who I think will slide in just at the end of day 2. I think it's going to be a big run on cornerbacks in the second round. And these 5 should be sitting here in round 3 for the Bucks. So I think Cam Taylor-Britt would be a really nice addition out there, who does remind me a little bit of a Carlton Davis type coming out of Auburn. A little stiff hip, a little bit clunky in transitions, but he has the size, he has the toughness, has the speed, and is still a young, growing kid. So I think Cam Taylor-Britt would be a nice piece there for Todd Bowles' defense.
I love the fit. I love the reasoning behind it. Everything there makes a lot of sense. I love that one. Dane, let's round it out with yours. You've got the Washington Commanders here. Day 2 was the area of the draft that you drew. So you can go round 2, round 3. You've got quarterback. So if they decide that they want to go QB, which, by the way, we had North Carolina's pro day today with Sam Howell, Washington well represented there. Really, they've been well represented at all these quarterback pro days. So definitely something that's still potentially in the cards there for Washington. Who do you like here in this one?
Well, okay, Scott Turner's offense. We know like to run a lot of RPOs. Carson Wentz now in the fold as the starting quarterback, but you want to get someone behind him that you can develop. And it's important that, we're talking about day 2 here. So, for this exercise, we'll say Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis are off the board. Now if every other quarterback's available, I think that you could make a case for Matt Corral here as being a really good fit stylistically for that offense. But I think that with the state of their franchise and I there's some question marks with Corral off the field and just maturity wise, things like that. So maybe I'm going to go with Desmond Ridder here. I think a guy with Desmond Ridder kind of even looks like Carson Wentz a little bit, kind of tall, lean, he's a good athlete. You could really take Ritter's combine numbers and compare him favorably to any wide receiver in this class. It's kind of, I don't think that got enough attention with how Ridder tested. So he has the athleticism. He's a guy that's been around, 4-year starter, Cincinnati. He's a winner. He's got the self-confidence that you're looking for. I think he could come in and be a solid backup and a guy that you could see eventually, winning that quarterback job and being a natural fit in Turner's offense.
Yeah, I mean, this is an offense too. When you mentioned Scott Turner, like a lot of RPOs, but also, in history, they like to push the ball downfield. They want to be a vertical offense, and so Ridder definitely has the traits to be able to handle that kind of scheme. Well, guys, always a fun exercise. Appreciate your cooperation there. Always a fun deal to be able to do that on a weekly basis. Next week is a big week. Dane, you mentioned Desmond Ridder there at the end. And the reason why I wanted to save the quarterback for the end is because we are previewing the quarterbacks next week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. So all the guys that we have been talking about all year long in that position group, we're going to be breaking down right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
All right, good stuff there from Ben and Dane. Let's now transition to Draft Mailbag, where, again, the best way to reach us is to head on over to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify. Leave us a rating. Leave us a comment. If you've got a question, leave it there in the comment box, and we will get to it here in an upcoming show. We're going to start off with Lil BHB5, who left a few questions here and just said, hey, I fell in love with the draft a few years ago. Your show is my favorite to listen to. You guys are the best. A couple questions for you. So we'll start with question number 1. Last year, there was definitely a top tier of 12 to 15 players. About how many tiers of talent-wise are there in this year's first round? It doesn't seem to be as strong a drop-off this year from the top into the middle of the first round. So I would say Ryan, and Ryan is the name of the commenter here. Ryan, I would say that, yeah, that is what most people feel about this draft, is that it's not as top-heavy. When you get to the top end of round 1 into the top 10, the blue-chip players just aren't there. To me, I look at it a little bit differently. I still think that there's plenty of really good talent in this class. Is it going to be as shiny or as exciting as some of the other classes we've seen in recent years? No, because we're not talking about quarterbacks consistently in the top 5. We're not talking about some of these other positions that a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, like this guy definitely is going to be a top 5 player, a top 10 player in this draft. But I think overall, the talent pool is still really, really good. And I think at the end of the day, when you talk to people around the league, when you talk to teams, you'll hear the fact, oh, well, we only have 16, 17, 15, 20 guys at most first-round grades that we give out on a yearly basis. And that's why, personally, I struggle with the idea of saying when I'm giving out a grade to a player, oh, yeah, he's a first-round grade, he's a second-round grade, because that's going to mean something different every single year. That's just the way my brain wraps around that idea, right? So to me, it's easier for my brain to be able to look at it and say, well, what is this guy when he reaches the NFL? I don't care about what he's drafted. What is he when he gets to the league? Is he a starter? Is he a high-impact starter? Is he a backup? Is he a role player? Is he a back-end roster player? You have those different delineations. To me, that's an easier way for my mind to kind of wrap around the value for different players at different areas of the draft. So next part of your question. In what order do you see these players getting drafted? Jahan Dotson, Jaquan Brisker, and Arnold Ebiketie. And these are all three players from Penn State. Jahan Dotson, wide receiver, Jaquan Brisker at safety, and Ebiketie from off the edge as a pass rusher. And to me, I would look at it and say, my best guess, I think Ebiketie and Dotson are probably the first two off. We'll go in that order. I'll say Ebiketie number one, Jahan Dotson number two, really, really tight there, and Jaquan Brisker kind of taking it up at number three. And I think Brisker is probably off the board by the end of the second round, if I had to guess, right? So you're talking about all three of these players going in the top 64 picks. And then the third part of the question, do you see defensive ends dropping due to the depth of this position? To me, I don't really think so, because I think teams are always looking for pass rush help. So I think when you look at the defensive ends, those outside linebackers, those quarterback hunters, they're always going to go. It's the same thing at quarterback every year, right? To me, where those guys are valued in 2022, that's where they would have been valued in 2020. That's where they would have been valued in 2018. If you're a pass rusher, yeah, there's a chance. Of course, you're going to see guys bump down a little bit, but they're not going to fall too far because everybody's looking for pass rushers. So if you're good, you're going to get drafted early. And so that's how I feel overall about the pass rushers. Ryan, great stuff there. Really appreciate the three-part question. And then last one here, Bert2349 left a 5-star review with a mock draft. And as always, we are always going to break those down here on the show, saying, I love the podcast. You guys give so much great information on so many different prospects. Hands down, one of my favorite podcasts. Really, really appreciate that comment. So I had some time recently to go through some mock draft simulators. And some of the bigger simulator websites, I found that certain players would always go higher, and then there are some that are consistently falling. Am I wrong on where some of these players should be going? Here's my mock draft. This is a mock that I can get pretty consistently, which seems pretty crazy to me. So real quick, we'll do it as we always do. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. This is an Eagles-only mock draft. Round 1, Jermaine Johnson, pass rusher from Florida State. Devontae Wyatt, the defensive tackle from Georgia. Andrew Booth, the cornerback from Clemson. That seems just about right. I think a lot of mock drafts, if you look at the big names in the mock draft industry, most of them have Jermaine Johnson going off the board by this point. It seems like Devontae Wyatt starting to get a little bit more juice for being off the board there in the middle of the first round. And Andrew Booth, that's right around where a lot of people have him going, anywhere from 12 to 25. Somewhere in that range. So that seems like it's about right to me. You get to Day 2, a couple of linebackers here in Chad Muma and Damone Clark. As we talked about earlier, Clark probably not going to go off the board at this point in the draft, but Chad Muma at 51, that's right in the wheelhouse of where a lot of people feel he's going to go in this draft. And then you get to Day 3, Oregon safety Verone McKinley, Alabama corner Jalen Armour Davis, Nebraska center Cam Jurgens. That would be the one guy I would say, yeah, he's definitely going to go a little bit earlier than pick 162. Tyson Anderson, the safety from Toledo, and then Jeffrey Gunter, the defensive end from Coastal Carolina. Of those picks, I would say that Jurgens definitely the most likely to go on Day 2. I think McKinley has a shot to go late in Day 2. Tyson Anderson, I think he's kind of like that under-the-radar sleeper guy that could sneak into the third round, just because when you look at how big he is and the way that he moves and the amount of football he's played, that kind of skill set, that can be tough to find. I think teams are looking for those matchup-type safeties. Tyson Anderson might sneak into the back end of the second day. But all those other guys, I think that kind of fits. So I think from a value standpoint, that's a really good job there with that mock draft. I would say when you're talking about the simulators, again, you are all these simulator websites, they're all operated independently, right? So for whatever company is running them, you are up to whoever is in charge of upkeeping, in terms of draft status. And obviously some, you can use certain people's big boards. You can use PFF's big board, or you can use Dane Brugler's, or anybody that has an updated top 100. You can use their boards. So look, it all depends in terms of what you're looking at. But always a fun exercise to be able to go through and just kind of get a sense of how people view these prospects at this stage of the process. Great stuff, as always, from Ben Fennell and from Dane Brugler. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be breaking down the quarterbacks next week here in this position preview episode. But we'll be back later this week, excited for the trio of guests, including Greg Cosell. Ben Fennell will be back, as always, right here later this week on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.